Zambia is ranked the most deforested country in Africa and 5th in the world. The country loses over 300,000 hectares of forest cover per year. Various practices, among them charcoal production, have been cited as key drivers of deforestation and forest degradation in Zambia. Today on News in Depth, we examine the extent of damage charcoal production has had on Zambia's forest. The documentary will also look at possible solutions to the problem. I am your host, Macpherson Mkuka. Stay tuned. A man-made hill, breathing smoke as though the earth's crust has been gutted, but left to burn. This is a charcoal kiln in Mumba district in Central Province. This site is synonymous with most rural parts of Zambia, where people's livelihoods are largely dependent on natural resources, such as trees. Hundreds of Miombo woodlands trees, cut down from a nearby forest in the district, are buried here, burning under high temperature, regulated by tiny holes drilled in the kiln. This is a traditional process of making charcoal, a product of trees used for heating and cooking. Zambia has approximately 49 million hectares of forest, translating to about 66% of total landmass. It is considered as one of the most forested countries in Southern Africa. Ironically, Zambia is ranked number 1 in Africa and number 5 in the world on the Deforestation Index, making it one of the most deforested countries. It is estimated that approximately 300,000 hectares of forest cover is lost per year. The status quo is not pleasing to environmental activists championing the preservation of forests.
The rate at which deforestation is actually happening in our country is very alarming. But you need to also understand what is actually causing the rate of deforestation, what is actually driving people to cut down trees and also to clear so many hectares of forests. So because of the levels of poverty and because the people don't have that direct link to electricity, that's why you see a lot of people now cutting down trees for actually fuel production, for charcoal.
It is a sad situation because what it implies is basically that Zambia is enjoying a situation of poverty because much of that deforestation which contributes to the greenhouse gases is actually the result of poverty because people depend on the natural resource, particularly the forestry, for survival.
Factors leading to deforestation and forest degradation in Zambia are agricultural expansion, unsustainable timber extraction, and infrastructure development. Operations in the mineral extraction industrial sector are also among leading factors for environmental degradation. But dependence on charcoal and firewood is seemingly taking a toll on forests as demand for energy increases, especially in rural areas not connected to the national electricity grid. What is also coming out more pronounced is the fact that charcoal and firewood production is a source of income for most rural families.
There's no profit in charcoal. I do this because of lack of things to do. I obviously can't be sitting home when my children and grandchildren need something to eat.
Other factors that contribute to the problem include inadequate support for land use planning, poor agriculture and forest resources management practices. Other factors are untapped alternative livelihood options and poor market access for marketable commodities and cash crops. Agents of Change, a youth-led environmental organization, believes failure in the promotion of alternative sources of livelihoods is what has led most resource-poor rural communities to engage in non-farming activities such as charcoal production.
The problem is not coming from the end users mostly. Yes, we know the end users can stop using that charcoal, but what happens to the people that are cutting down these trees for the charcoal production? How do we empower them? What kind of alternatives are we going to give them to ensure that they stay away from cutting trees to make charcoal, be empowered in a different way so that we can collectively find a solution to how we sort out this issue.
According to a 2015 study by the United Nations Programme on Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation, the economic value of Zambia's forest ecosystems, forest is estimated to provide at least 1.4 million jobs. This is in supporting 60% of rural Zambian households. However, the Center for Trade, Policy and Development feels the business is not sustainable, considering its impact on the environment and the people.
This practice is not sustainable. It actually leads to more problems. It enhances soil erosion, which makes it quite difficult for farmers to engage in productive ventures like agriculture, but it also leads to deforestation that will eventually make it very difficult for us to sustain even the rain pattern as the days are going by. So one of the things that we actually need to do is to try and promote alternative energy sources that can help to mitigate this challenge.
In Zambia, the Forestry Department is responsible for implementing national forestry policies and plans for forest use and management. The department provides the general management and control of forest resources in order to meet national and local demand.
We know that the rate is unfavorable. It is on the higher side. But I think government is trying to do all it can to try and reduce this deforestation. And I think one key issue that the government is doing is to ensure that participatory forest management is promoted.
The department's aim is also to ensure a sustainable flow of timber and non-timber forest products and services. At the same time, the department wants to ensure protection and maintenance of biodiversity for the benefit of present and future generations through active participation of all stakeholders. However, some stakeholders feel the absence of forest guards has contributed to the failure in general forest management.
Look, in the past, for instance, there were schedules that were known that even announcements would be made in terms of when fires may start as a way of managing the forest. Now, forest degradation can either be caused, apart from the cutting and the removing of the trees, can be caused by mismanagement of fires. And if we don't manage the fires very well, then you'll find that areas which are supposed to be well forested, they become scanty in terms of trees because all the shrubs, all the regrowth will end up being burnt.
The general management of forests in Zambia, I think, in some way has not really been, well protected, because we do realize that we have seen a lot of, in a sense, a lot of deforestation happening without any action taking place. You see what I mean? Because even as we are trying to manage these forests, we need to think sustainably. How? Because there are certain essentials that we might need from trees, but then even as we are getting those essentials from trees, how do we replace them?
Inadequate staffing makes it difficult for the department to implement and monitor sustainable forest management programs. Mr. Casaro also admits that shortage of forest guards, commonly known as Bakapenda Mabula, is impeding the department's fight to protect the forests.
As you may be aware, Forestry Department is in all the districts, and the numbers that we have cannot cater for that. In the past, all these protected areas that we have had at least 2 officers that of course, the forest guards, as they were called, Kapenda Maulas. You appreciate that they were able to monitor what was going on, and that reduced on the illegal activities. But now that these are not there, it's a bit open, and people are free to do whatever they can, because these areas are far from where the forest offices are.
Over the years, the government, working with stakeholders, has introduced a number of policies and legislation intended to address one or more aspects of natural resource management. Some of the more effective measures in terms of Zambian forest resource management have been the formulation of the National Policy on Environment, which promotes holistic and sound environmental management. Another measure has been the forestry policy, which promotes involvement of local communities in sustainable forest management and conservation.
This is one way of trying to address the issue of deforestation, so that the responsibility of managing the resource is taken to the communities. And I think if you look at our Forest Act, the forest policy, they are all effectively putting in the community as a priority. And I think with good planning, with time, we should be able to reduce this deforestation rate. Yeah.
It is, however, worth noting that these policies, good as they may be on paper and in their intention, they have been characterized by widespread failure in terms of implementation and enforcement.
We've heard of strategies on how to, prevent deforestation, promote afforestation and things like that. Different policies that have come and gone, but how well are we ensuring that these policies are really implemented in a way that we are protecting our environment, we are protecting our forests from, being cut further?
So with the creation of this new ministry, our expectation for a start is to look at the current legislation and see some of the policy gaps that might be there, because in the first place we didn't have this ministry. And if you look at issues around climate change, these are issues that were not receiving the much needed attention.
Zambia has so many beautiful policies around environmental protection and also forestry. We have the Forestry Act 2015, which is a very good policy. We also have what is called as the investment plan to actually reduce deforestation and forest degradation. I think what we need to actually focus on is the implementation of the already policies that have already been given to us, and also looking at how we can monitor and evaluate the progress that these policies have made.
Due to excessive forest degradation resulting from charcoal production, the biophysical environment of some parts of the country, southern, western, and some parts of central province, has relatively become sensitive and fragile, particularly in terms of land degradation. These factors have a severe impact on smallholder farmers, worsening levels of poverty in the regions, since local economies are largely dependent on subsistence farming.
If then we do not manage very well the sources of the wood, then you'll find much of our forest will be degraded and much of the forest will disappear. Eventually, even those who are depending on charcoal as a source of income will have no source of income at all, and therefore there's going to be disaster. So I think there's need to enhance on the efficiency at the sourcing, efficiency at the production, efficiency in the way of even transportation, and the utilization even of the charcoal waste.
Currently, the community-based natural resource management approach lacks clear guidelines on costs and benefit sharing mechanisms between government and the communities. Generally, the policies have resulted in the forest sector being regulated in a sectoral manner, with distinct regulatory and monitoring institutions, resulting in varying degrees of overlap and conflict.
There is need to enhance the community-based forest management so that they can start regulating themselves. Whoever sees a member going in the forest with a catamo will be able to ask, this act, what are you going to do in the forest? There are few demonstrations in the Eastern Province which we did as we were running a project called the Soil Conservation and Agroforestry Extension Program. And the communities were very keen and they started regulating. They created their own areas of protected forest.
But the good news is that government has realized this, and it has introduced community-based natural resource management approaches aimed at providing rural communities with secure tenure of their environmental resources. Additionally, communities are likely to receive the required assistance to manage their activities and environmental resources in an independent but collaborative manner.
And so through participatory forest management, it simply means that communities, together with the government, co-manage these forests. So apart from the forests that are protected under, like the national forests, local forests, there are also community forests that have been established by local communities. And so you find that the department is currently managing about 6 million hectares, while the communities are now closer to 2 million, and the number of communities are still registering.
Zambia is fighting to restore approximately 2 million hectares of degraded land by the year 2030. This is being done through various projects such as tree planting aimed at greening the lost forest cover. The civil society organizations are also making efforts by engaging with young people who are the agents of change.
We want these youths to actually, come up with alternatives to charcoal. We've seen most of them produce the charcoal briquettes, which are made from agricultural waste. Now we're seeing charcoal, also alternatives to charcoal being produced that actually comes in from from human waste, actually. So this is what we're trying to push for, that
we need to take part, in ensuring that our forests are recovered, even from smallest units like families, because we do realize that, families are the smallest unit of society. So when we start with families as individuals, ensuring that we're doing everything that we can to try and plant trees, to try and not, do anything that will harm the environment, this is something that can be attained. And as an organization ourselves, we have a very active group of young people who themselves are advocates, and what they've been advocating for is the restoration of our forests. We have participated in so many tree planting campaigns where, together with our young people, we've planted over 5,000 trees, but that still is not enough.
The 2030 vision on ending deforestation has further been advanced at the global front. Over 100 global leaders at the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26 in Glasgow, have committed to ending deforestation by the year 2030. President Hakainde Hichilema attended the COP26 conference, and he shared Zambia's roadmap to ending deforestation.
We are willing and ready to go further to reduce our emissions by 47% if we are adequately supported by you, our global partners. Number 3, we've increased the sectors under mitigation from the initial 3 to 6 in the revised NDC as we steadily move towards economy-wide mitigation approach. Number 4, given that adaptation is critical, a critical component of our NDC, we've also developed indicators to enable us to track progress on how we are building resilience in the natural and human systems. Number 5, we will expedite the implementation of activities through our development of bankable project proposals to enable us access the necessary financing.
The drivers of deforestation in Zambia are numerous, and at any one site, the main ones are closely interlinked and they vary from province to province. The major indirect drivers of deforestation are low institutional capacity, declining economic gains, high poverty levels, and environmental factors.
Now we have these opportunities where sale of carbon credits is in place. It's basically an incentive in which we are trying to be part of the international initiative, such that these communities, if they decide to protect an area, then or plant trees, they can access finance. Because government itself may not necessarily be the one that can provide all the monies required. But we need also the private sector to come in, and it can be done through, for example, promotion of this sale of carbon credits, which means the trees people can keep the trees standing because they will be having some monies coming to them, instead of just saying keep the trees and then they don't get the benefit.
The interaction between these drivers is complex. Addressing these factors requires an integrated approach ranging from improved livelihood systems to an enhanced support policy framework. But should charcoal production be banned?
Charcoal production should be banned, but with a plan or strategy on how, like earlier on we talked about, ensuring that these people who are involved in charcoal production are empowered in some way, because we need to come with solutions. We need to come with lasting solutions that will help them, will help their families, and help us as well to achieve whatever that we want to get out of this. So even as we think about banning, trying to ban the production of charcoal, we need to look for solutions. We need to implement the solutions that will help both parties.
Yes, from the Center for Trade Policy and Development, we are of the view that alternative livelihood options need to be explored. The people that are involved in charcoal burning will need to be engaged so that they can get to understand the negative externalities that come with cutting trees without also coming up with remedial measures such as replanting. And besides that, there is need to have an emphasis where we can open up new opportunities in most of these areas where trees are cut.
Let us provide alternatives of charcoal towards, most of the people in these rural parts. Then we can now, continue to issue out bans of charcoal production. People usually in the urban settings have access to electricity. So it's only fair for us to, continue to push for them to actually stop charcoal production. But for those in the rural areas, as long as we have that access, that market for them to actually access alternatives to charcoal, I think it would be very unfair to tell communities that don't have access to electricity to stop charcoal production.
Improving rural livelihood systems would greatly contribute to rural poverty alleviation, thereby reducing over-dependence on forest resources by rural communities. However, climate change expert Martin Sishekano feels dependence on wood fuel in form of charcoal and firewood will not end as long as energy alternatives are not preached to the rural community.
The goodness is that the forest product is basically a renewable product. And so as you are talking of charcoal production is supposed to be a renewable production system as long as we are able to manage our forests, as long as we are able to manage the way we source the charcoal, as long as we are able to manage sustainably the way we produce our charcoal, the way we transport and the distribution, and particularly also if we can manage the efficiency with which we are able to use the charcoal, that will go a long way in reducing even the deforestation factor.
Meanwhile, those in the charcoal business say they are ready to give up, provided incentives are given to them.
If government provided some money or any incentives, I would gladly quit dealing in charcoal. I know the consequences of cutting trees for charcoal production, but I currently have no option.
If they give us money to venture into a different business, we are ready to stop. Because as things are, this is the only source of income for me and my family.
In advent of the current happenings in the forest mismanagement, experts estimate that Zambia risks losing over 10 million hectares of forest cover in the next 30 years. To prevent this projected environmental disaster, there is need to improve the livelihood of the rural communities, which are the major actors of deforestation and forest degradation. Provision of alternative and eco-friendly sources of energy, such as the use of briquettes, blocks made from sawdust obtained by the wood production scraps, can reduce the deforestation caused by the production of charcoal. That is all we could package for you on this week's edition of News in Depth. We have been looking at how charcoal production has contributed to forest degradation in Zambia. Join us next time for yet another exciting News in Depth documentary. I've been your host, Macpherson Mkuka. Stay safe.